itself before our very eyes. And what a surprise now that Western civilization, which was built on this lie, built on the suppression of female hypergamy, is crumbling along with it. And because men are so invested, because we can't bring ourselves to admit that the civilization we built was built on lies, we still can't point to the queen and say what everybody knows, that she has no clothes, and furthermore, that she wants it that way. Again, a civilization built on lies will eventually crumble under those very same lies. A civilization built on the purposeful ignorance of hypergamy will eventually crumble when enough men rediscover it. Picture the neatly ordered, relatively stable array of hundreds of mousetraps. There are spring mechanisms held open by a ping pong ball each individually. Imagine all of the work that went into carpeting a floor with mousetrap after mousetrap, and imagine how time-consuming it was to pry them open and keep them open, each with its own individual ping pong ball. And then imagine this array as the collected works and achievements of Western civilization. Let's say that one of these mousetraps represented the advancements of female birth control, technological advancement and mechanization, and with these advances comes one revelatory, free-flying ping-pong ball out of the ether, representing female hypergamy reassertion. What happens when just one free ping-pong ball is introduced into the system, our metaphorical dollop of unignorable female nature? What happens? Well, the first mousetrap is sprung, the ping-pong ball goes flying and it hits 2 other mousetraps, that one hits 4, the next hits even more, and exponential chaos always ensues. So again, a civilization built on a woman as reward system, which also chooses to remain willfully ignorant of female hypergamy, which cultivates in its men and boys a belief that women view men in a way that they're just not biologically programmed to do so, is flirting with and will eventually fall victim to civilizational collapse. It makes you think, what sad little people that lash out at everything around them, desperately looking for a scapegoat to satiate their displaced anger. You see, I'm not even angry at women for rejecting the nuclear family in droves once the opportunity allowed it. As I've said plenty of times before, I'm glad that women did this. Not about the money and children they confiscated in divorce. That, of course, was pure evil. But I'm happy they did it because it destroyed the little fucking dream world we were living in. And because I believe that in a society where women aren't coddled like helpless children, where their actions are linked to consequences, they can and will shake off the infantilization of women that the modern nuclear family breeds. And they just may emerge out of it. And this is the great fear of the social conservative. They just may emerge as fully independent, autonomous beings with their hypergamy intact. The social conservatives' main concern has never been for men, but for whether or not women still need men. They are purveyors of the woman as the male's life mission and reward motto. And so when men no longer wish to carry women, and when technology and mechanization creates a reality of constantly decreasing need for the provider male archetype, we see a cascading rejection of the traditional family unit. We see cascading divorce is what we see happen. Now again, it's never been a question of whether or not women can be given incentives to curb their hypergamous instincts. The question is whether or not they should be. Social conservatives are terrified of a non-infantilized, independent female willing to provide for herself whilst having her hypergamous instincts still intact. That's what this is about, a fear of the unbridled hypergamy that will arise out of any society where women are expected to do for themselves. You see, whatever will replace the dead conventional nuclear family is something that will involve men taking into account an honest view of female hypergamy instead of this delusional model where men believe their little special soulmate really truly loves them, and where women are required to pretend their hypergamy doesn't exist and that their reproductive habits aren't dictated by male status and money and the like. What replaces the dead nuclear family will be a demystified and scrutinized transactional and reality-based arrangement where men and women, but specifically men, are under no false illusions about what's happening. It will not be deified. It will not be viewed as some ethereal bond between men and women. It will be viewed through a crystal clear lens of resources for access to sex and reproduction. Reproduction then will be commoditized, and so will sex. Prostitution will be legalized, and so will surrogacy. As simple as that. When the reality of the male-female sexual coupling becomes the default, only then will we see men and women in the right reality-based frame of mind to form something more significant than the traditional and conventional family unit. Until then, it'll just be the lie it is today. Now let's talk about women in politics in the current, left-right debate within the men's rights movement. We've seen plenty of right-wing politicians in the last 50 years or so since feminism first hit, and feminists haven't backed down from a single one of them at all. You see, women practice identity politics. They're not worried about winning political battles with men who refuse to do the same. No, you see, to many men, the men's rights movement is about an extension of a current political typhoon struggle between the left and the right, and how every MRA should pick a side and get on board already. They're not about men's rights and issues. A men's rights issue is, for example, the right for infant boys to not be circumcised, or the right as a man to face one's accuser during a false accusation of rape. Men's rights is about rights or the deprivation of them which affect men in the majority. Because I got news for you. If you examine the various freedom-shredding legislations that have been passed not only in America but worldwide since 9/11 alone, if you examine the various executive orders by the Bush administration, the Obama administrations, you're left with a massive, an absolutely massive body of legislation to rectify. It all boils down to this contingent of largely right-wing, fake conservative men that do not want to see men self-interested. Meaning that blacks and whites and women and gays and atheists and Christians and Muslims can and most certainly will fight for the civil rights issues specifically benefiting their race or gender or sexual orientation or religion or lack thereof. But men, though, we have to be worried about every other political group's grievances as well. We have to play fair according to their own definition of fair, because fairness, of course, is dictated by what all other competitors are allowed to do. But no, we have to play by our own rule sets because, well, I guess we have honor, that thing that leaves us on boats to drown while everyone else lives. Feminists are not afraid of men in their political parties. They laugh at men in their feeble attempts to battle them on the political theater. Women don't fear politicians. We're talking about 51% of the voting bloc who happen to live longer lives with which to vote in, which are also biologically equipped and predispositioned towards getting men to protect and provide for them. You MRAs admittedly have your work cut out for you, and I wish you the best of luck. Now, I've given in previous videos what I believe to be the most efficient political approach. That's class action lawsuits against all legitimate forms of discrimination against men, guerrilla warfare, isolated legal actions that target specific instances of misandric human rights violations that cannot be reasonably defended in the court of law. We're talking about a campaign of purposeful pursuance of pro-male legal precedents that do not violate the rights of women. Instead, the course of action being put forward is the impossibility of dismantling an entire feminist and even larger liberal political infrastructure, a process that will manifest itself, according to GOP infiltrators, by voting politicians like Mitt Romney into office. Well, that should work just fine, shouldn't it? Again, and sincerely, if it helps MRAs in any way possible, I'll gladly lend a helping hand. But the fact is that as it currently stands, men are outgunned big time in the political challenge to feminism they're planning on mustering. And the fact is that we haven't changed one major legislation yet. Now, if I'm proven completely wrong on this, I'll be the first to eat my words, but I've said this many times before, that I do not see a major victory for men on the political front, at least until the threat of a class action discrimination suit can come from anywhere from men of varying political stripes that get really pissed off wherever they confront misandry. The fact is that many men hate feminism and yet want nothing to do with the GOP, or the left for that matter, and so insisting to men that to be an MRA one must be conservative only works as a repellent to those men that want no political affiliation but do want to fight misandry, and that's exactly why over here, on this channel, men will not be expected to join this weak-minded political tribalism bullshit. If you're interested in male sovereignty and male freedom and how it can be achieved, you're more than welcome here. I refuse to say that in order to be an MRA, you absolutely have to be on the right or the left. I personally will try to advise you of the fact that I believe that both of these political parties are irreparably corrupt and misandric. But everyone these days is in varying degrees of wanting to reject the system while simultaneously needing to continue to believe in it. And this is why we see such polarized politics today. Society's subconscious is telling them that their political system is completely fucked, so they seek to divorce themselves then by one half of the political spectrum by labeling them as the great evil, the great Satan that must be overcome if we would just defeat the left, or if we could just defeat the conservatives. That kind of tribalistic bullshit that never gets anybody anywhere. With this said, again, if I see an opportunity for me to be able to contribute effectively to the political efforts of MRAs, I will do so without hesitation. But for the record, my bets are on the war of attrition that both conscious and unconscious men going their own way are already in the middle of fighting. and my mission is to get as many men as possible to eschew traditional provider roles and traditional societal expectations for men. Now, while it's true that going your own way is an individualistic term varying from man to man, but it's pretty much common knowledge that many who have chosen to go their own way have a shared anti-traditionalist bent, and this is what I wish to focus on, not politics, as far as I'm concerned. The question of whether or not women can be effectively opposed politically should be asked. Women, who are far removed from any pretense of political fairness, stemming from our society's embracing of female dysfunction, one of the many tariffs that a society which chooses to infantilize its women must pay. But because of these dysfunctions, we end up having a population of female children holding the immense powers of reproduction and their equally potent votes. The Twilight Zone episode of the child who could kill you just by thinking it if he read your mind and figured out you were thinking bad thoughts about him comes to mind. Women have this immense power and the reasoning capacity of children because they're cultivated to. And so in asking whether or not they can be politically opposed, you have to take note of the fact that political society, throughout the political spectrum, has decreased expectations of women and regards them with the full benefits that childhood offers in terms of consequences and responsibilities, or more accurately a lack thereof, and at the same time upholds their very adult rights and privileges, and that little cocktail forms an impregnable juggernaut where one's own political soldiers will refuse to fight for you if you're perceived to be bringing out the big guns against women. If you attack women politically with the same ferocity they've attacked men with, then expect a backlash from your own political allies. I mean, it's amazing to watch. As a matter of fact, I've even seen MRAs categorize women as inanimate objects, that men going their own way focus too much on women and that women should be looked at as some sort of force of nature to be managed, or even a figurative inanimate forest or mountain. I've seen some liken women to a wild tigress. I'm not making this up. A wild tigress that can only be expected to attack. And that's how they justify their whole let's blast women back to the 1950s mentality. All of this, of course, is designed to portray women as innocents, lacking in all agency and responsibility. Because, of course, mountains and tigers don't vote, they don't divorce, they don't make false domestic violence accusations, and they don't take your kids. This is the political outlook of some MRAs. What do you think you're going to encounter in the chivalrous blue pill world of left-right politics? Let it be recorded here for posterity, and so everyone knows when and where it was said, that if men do not begin to see themselves as a political class, if they do not identify as a political group that is willing to pursue the rights and interests of men unapologetically, their political attempts will be utterly futile and dispatched effortlessly by the forces of politicized feminism and chivalry. Point blank, full stop. I'm making that prediction right here and now. With that said, I wish to reference the quote on the gateway to hell in Dante's Divine Comedy. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. Now, I'm not talking about comparisons between hell and Western civilization. My referencing of this quote has nothing to do with hell at all, and everything to do with letting go. I mean, just letting go. That's what men going their own way means to me. I just stopped caring at all. I don't care if I ever have another relationship again, and although I do take it as it comes, I don't care if I ever get laid again at all, and I don't care if Western civilization collapses. I just don't care. And the best part about letting go completely to the lies we've been sold is that you're completely free. I've never felt more free in my life. I'm crystal clear right now. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. It's the only thing that feminists and traditionalists can't fight. That is men who stopped hoping in their system. They thrive off of your hope. Your talk of politics, they can smell the hope on that. They can smell the rancid belief in their system. The system where women in the state will always hold more authority than men do. And again, if this sounds too cynical, I welcome and will even help MRAs to prove me wrong, even if I believe it to be an ultimately futile gesture. I'm more than capable of exerting the required effort behind MRAs to help them see that the political system is just too far gone. I want to point out that the only act on the part of men that has drawn any introspection from the current male-female gender dynamic is one of passive resistance. You'll notice that traditionalist women like the one in this video aren't the only ones talking about where have all the good men gone. Feminists have posted numerous man-up articles themselves. It's the only thing that actually seems to register on the radar of both traditional women and feminists that something's very wrong here. And this is an act of attrition. The marriage strike is a man going his own way discipline. We know that many of the men avoiding marriage and consequently avoiding the liability of an infantilized female along with her legal property, that is the children you'll give her, we know that many of these men have never even heard of men going their own way, but the school of thought that is rejecting marriage en masse stems from a natural breaking point in the male condition designed to make him endure substantially and for extended periods of time, followed by an all-encompassing cessation of caring. A Rubicon point, if you will, of no longer giving a fuck, which once passed cannot be regained, which is also organic and walks in lockstep with men going their own way philosophy. And that, I think, is where the advantage lies, because in order to become a men's rights activist, for example, one must know that a men's rights movement exists. I think at the very least, men are highly unlikely to start fighting for men's rights all of their own accord, without knowledge of a men's rights movement. But if men look around them at a world where gender interaction is defined by the parameters of Brieflt's law and hypergamy, and divorce and rampant unrestrained female sexual license, which again I have no interest in controlling, but if men look around them and see all of this divorce and see other men getting burned or being in miserable relationships with parasitic female ingrates, then they'll shut off in exactly the same way someone like me, who's cognizant of men going their own way as a name attached to this male shut-off mechanism, they'll shut off in the same way that I did. This is why it's so important, as far as I'm concerned, to explore what catalyzes this male shut-off holding pattern. This is why it's so important to take a biological and anthropological look at what exactly causes male apathy as it relates to women. Again, the only thing that has caused any real panic as a result of feminism is decreasing marriage rates due to a self-perpetuating marriage strike and decreasing birth rates. So for all of this talk about political solutions, the only time that the feminist media seems to give any attention to what's going on is when what is largely a men going their own way approach, one of attrition and starving the machine and refusing to be the upholders and, more importantly, the maintainers of families and marriages, then we see them panic with their "where have all the good men" articles. So in my opinion, it will be the men that have simply voted with their feet that will continue to drive down the marriage rate, that will continue to drive down the birth rate far past their already unsustainable levels, and that is ignored at the consequence of civilizational atrophy and death. That's all I really got to say for now. Thanks for listening.